Thank you, Radek, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. It's great to be back in Poland. It's great to be back in Warsaw. I have several friends here, and actually I find Warsaw a very romantic city, which may surprise some, but I will definitely come back in the summertime. It's less romantic now. As Radek told you, I come from above. I was born and raised above north of the Arctic Circle. It's pretty much dark 24 hours. Well, not really, maybe 20 hours soon. And it shapes us in a certain way, the people who live there and grow up there. This is a picture of my backyard. It's an old mining industry, an old mining town. I think this picture illustrates it even better. So this shapes you into not liking change, but understanding that things will not be the same tomorrow. I have several friends. My old chemistry teacher from primary school, he built his house on a plot of land where the lease was renewed by the mining industry every 3 years. So you get to accept change, and you get to understand that things will be different. This is a Friday evening in my old hometown. You can see things is really happening here. And this brings out a lot of patience and creativity in us. And patience is really good. And it's a myth to say that all of us are introverts, but some are. And 30 minutes like this is a lightning talk where I come from. So I'll really try to speed this up for you. But looking at behaviors and looking at the way we act, one of the big issues I always had with the Agile movement was that it's very extroverted, right? You have to tell everyone what you do. You have to ask for help. You have to have brainstorming sessions. Sometimes you even have to wear funny hats. And I always took a position to this because I found that when introducing Agile in organizations and working with coaching teams, a lot of people resisted that and then confused Agile with having an extroverted behavior. And I'm actually positively surprised that a lot of the focus of this conference and these talks these days is about behavior and going past the tools and the tricks. So what I'm going to show you here today is a trick, a technique I've used to bring out the positive Agile behavior in people and teams. But it's not a recipe. It's a way of introducing and rewarding a different behavior. So bear with me a bit. Also, just to give you some background, apart from being an introvert, I'm very interested in other chaotic things, such as music production and the tools for music production. And when you're fed up with Agile and Lean and whatever, and you go home and you want to do something different, I do music production and I do tutorials on music production on tools. So you can check that out if you like. But let's go back to people and interactions. So dedicated tools are making a huge comeback now. Does any one of you know what this is? It's a typewriter. It's a very successful Kickstarter project, which is a typewriter for 2017. And it can do one thing. You can write on it. You can't edit. And it's constantly syncing to the cloud. And I love dedicated tools. So I immediately backed this project, and it increased my writing by several hundreds of %. I write so much more today than I did before this because it drives you to focus on one thing. But you have a laptop, you even have a Mac. It's so much better than that. Yeah, but this is where I have Facebook and all my social media and my email and my work and my website, which should be updated, and my blog, which I haven't posted on. You see where I'm going? This is the biggest trend in the music industry now. We're moving towards, all of the early 2000s, it was all about what's called in the box. It's making entire songs, productions in the computer using software plugins. We're moving away from that now. We're moving to a combination of software and actually dedicated hardware. For the first time since the early 90s, synthesizers, drum machines, sequencer, tangible objects that can do one thing and do it well. It's the big thing on all the big fairs of music production. I find this really interesting. Okay, so from music production to a concept. So we all heard different descriptions of push versus pull. So I'll give you my brief description of push versus pull. So we know that every system has finite capacity. And when I speak about system, and please excuse my very scientific drawing here, but this is the fastest way I can do it. Every system, and I don't mean an IT system, I mean the organization of people working together, has limitations. And there are basically two ways you can manage this. There are two ways you can run this type of organization or help them out. The first is what I call capacity ignorant or push. Now this is where you have management pushing in work, not knowing, understanding, or even sometimes not caring about the capacity and the limitations. And this is an interesting way of working because this is the standard operating procedure for most organizations I work with today. So you have these really advanced portfolio meetings and priority meetings, but you still reward project managers for running their own project on time and budget through this pipe. Now the pipe can't manage all of these projects, but we don't know. So we apply even more and more advanced techniques to try to prioritize and predict this. I call these meetings the meetings of broken hopes and dreams. This is where careers end or start. If you're lucky, if your project got through fast, you're promoted. If you're unlucky, your project got stuck, you're sent to the archive. The other way of doing this is, of course, to do it pull-driven. This is where the capacity dictates how fast or slow we can do things. The problem with this is that it raises tricky questions. And the first tricky question it raises is usually, oh wow, it looks like we're trying to do too many things at a time. And you know we have tools for dealing with this. We use Kanban to limit WIP. We use Scrum to try to batch things. But in the end, it's more efficient, I found, if we use these techniques to teach the system itself, to learn about its capacity and limitations, and how to work with them. So, to further illustrate my points, let me introduce you to a few characters from my past who I met. None of these fit into what I thought was the standard agile way of working back then. So first up, we have a team of rebels. These are not the agile rebels. This is before their time. So the team of rebels, they were a team in a company that were quite successful in transitioning from a more old style way of working to an agile way of working. But one team was really stubborn. And the problem was they were really clever. It's usually clever ones that oppose, right? So you have to listen to them and talk to them and learn something, which I did. So they told me, we don't want to do relative estimates anymore. We don't want to do planning poker. I said, why? Obviously, it's better. It's agile, right? Well, back then I was confusing methods with frameworks and thinking. And they said, no, well, we were pretty good at doing estimates before and balancing our capacity. We find that relative estimates only confuses things. And we don't do this planning poker, by the way, because it enforces another type of behavior, which is to try to look for where the other guy is playing so I can play something similar. So I did what I think every person who is considered to be, or at least tries to portray themselves as some kind of expert in a field, said, you know what, I'll wave my magic wand over you and I say, you're free. You don't have to do planning poker anymore. And they were like, wow, really? You can't do Agile without that? Yeah, sure. Now, there is a problem, though. They were doing things now with hours and days and statistical measures, and the other teams were doing it in points. So how do we integrate this? That's a cliffhanger for you. But the takeaway here is that the method is not important. The behavior it suggests or rewards is. So if you call yourself a coach, or you call yourself some kind of expert in these ways of working, what you should be looking for is always the behaviors. Are we rewarding people for working in a way where they think and they collaborate and interact and they deal with situations and they extend their toolbox continuously and they remove tools that we sort of fell in love with, but they drive the wrong behaviors? It's still 2017. Most of my clients still focus on the tools. They ask me, how long should the daily Scrum be? Or we heard that Kanban is better than Scrum. Or Scrum is better than Kanban. Or whatever is better than whatever. I think this polarization between frameworks, methods, and tools is really damaging. And it's currently happening. The really skilled organizations and people, they mix. They combine things. They try and adapt. Next one. This is a really tough guy. He was a functional manager, quite a high position in a company I was working with. This was in the energy industry. They were building power plants. And we were using Scrum and Kanban to map their portfolio and work with the constraints. And he told me, you say that every team needs to be cross-functional. But I have a team that we need to have functional. Wow. So, I gave him the standard speech, the lecture about how cross-functional makes it easier to have a good definition of done, to know when we're finished features, to mix skills. And he said, yeah, well, here's the problem. I have a team. One end of the team, I have a very junior, a very new employee, fresh out of school. In another end of the team, I have someone who has worked for 35 years in this industry. And there's a mix in between. Now, if we do this cross-functional and we spread them out on separate teams, it becomes a lottery. And one team will draw the jackpot. This is the really experienced person. And someone else will draw the blank. And it also creates a behavior where you as a junior feel that you are expected to live up to the expectations of the very senior person. It creates a ton of stress. So he suggested, I want to keep them for now as a functional team, as an internal supplier, so they can learn from each other. But the long-term goal is, of course, to move these people, to let them feel when they are safe to move to a cross-functional team, they're allowed to do so. Which we did, and that taught me a valuable lesson for sure. So it's better to know why you do things and which behaviors it rewards, rather than just doing them. I also find that many managers, when we have first contact, they always ask me, should we reorganize? Should we be organized in a different way to work Agile? There's even books written about this. I found that ways of working are easier to change than organization. It introduces less stress, and it always trumps the organization form. I mean, one of the most currently famous Agile organizations, the Spotify model, is based on a matrix. Doesn't have to be complicated. Free Agent was a guy, he's a very good friend of mine. He wasn't back then. I was his boss, and I was introducing Agile at the same time. And he told me, I really enjoy this Agile stuff. I think sprints is great and so on. But it cramps my style. It doesn't suit my way of working. And I was pretty surprised, because all of the other teams, they were saying, it really reduces our stress level to be able to focus. And he felt his stress level was increasing. And I said, why? He said, well, I can't be confined to working in a sprint. That's not the way I operate. So I listened to him for a while, and then I told him, I hear what you say. And most of you will know that that is management language for, I don't care about what you say. So I said, I hear what you say, But we're going to do it my way anyway because I'm the expert. So he quit the same day. And of course, this was really sad because first of all, he was a great guy. And second of all, it hurt my confidence as well because now people were looking really glumly at me and saying, what do you know? The most appreciated guy and most valuable guy just left our company. So I started talking a bit more to him. And this is the type of guy, you see one or two of them in each organization. They write a bit of production code, they do a bit of prototyping. Next time you see them, they're in the support department picking up a tricky support call, helping out. You find him next to the coffee machine, having a coffee with the CEO, explaining how we could use the technology to do business even better. You know these persons. There's people like this, a handful in every organization, and they often feel confined by being sprinted. So I invented a new role for them, and you can do that if you come from the outside and you say, hey, let's try a role called a free agent. Your job is to seek out work wherever it is, and you find it. And whenever you enter a team and you support them, you follow the team's guidelines and rules. So if they have daily stand-ups, you do the daily stand-ups. If they have demos, you do the demos. And then you leave. It's simple as that. Fourth example is the blueprint man. This was an engineering organization in Western Sweden. Again, this guy approached me. He was really tall. He was very quiet, soft-spoken. And he said, I'm really stressed out by this Agile thing. There are so many meetings. And I said, yeah, well, it will pass. It will feel like work. And he said, no. And I said, what's the problem? He said, it's easier if you come with me. So I came to his office, and this was back when we had offices, so people could work focused and actually produce things. But that's a different talk. And his office, most of it was occupied by a huge table. And there was this gigantic blueprint, an electronics chart, a diagram of electronic circuits. This was the entire electrical design of the product, and he was the one person who fully understood it. So whenever there was a change in the software timing, when there was a change in the APIs, whatever interfaces, he got back to his blueprints, he looked at them for 2 hours straight, and he understood the implications and made the changes. No one else was able to do this. And the problem was, there were so many meetings now and people constantly interrupting him. So we had to go back to the 2 hours too often. So I said, okay, let's cut down on your meetings then. Well, do you need the daily scrum? Yeah, it's good to be there. Maybe once a week, sure. Try once a week and we'll go from there. And he actually started appearing twice a week. And this rewarded a different behavior because now team members started to understand this guy's work, maybe we shouldn't disturb him. Maybe we should try to disturb him with questions only those days when he shows up. And maybe we should learn more about the basics of the electric design so we can answer some of those simple questions and not bother him. Again, rewarding the proper behaviors. One thing all of these have in common, apart from that they surely didn't fit my model of Agile that I had early on, was that they all operate above the sprint and between teams. Maybe not all the time, but some of the time. When I started working with Agile around the turn of the millennium, I found that it really helped a lot of people with time management and effort management. It helped them to structure the workdays. It gave them an excuse to interact more, not only over coffee. But it also caused a lot of organizations to lose sight of the long-term perspective, and they became what I used to refer to as sprint agile. And there's only one thing worse than sprint agile, is sticky note agile, and that is when you go too far with Kanban, for instance. You only have focus on one thing at a time. You lose sight of the long-term decisions you need to be making. I try to counter this by introducing a tactical level. Tactical level for me, this is as far as we can look ahead as multiple teams with dependencies and see how should we focus our work. It's not about achieving milestones or goals, it's about how to spend our time and our efforts. I call this a focus map because it's all about focus. First reaction I got, Mikael, this isn't agile. Now you say we need to plan up front. So I changed the word plan to forecast. In many organizations that flew. Oh wow, we don't have to plan anymore. We'll forecast our work and how to spend our focus. And guess what? They became better at planning by doing this. Because they agreed on we shouldn't be doing like 5 or 6 things this week. We should be focusing on this one thing that have a lot of dependencies, and by the way, we need to work together and get through with it. This was around mid-2000s, the most wanted feature of Agile from every organization I talked to, because there's usually a gap between the strategic roadmap level and the sprint or operational level. There's an emptiness there. As a product owner, you don't really know what to do. Should I use the product backlog as my instrument of choice to try to tell people, you know, we really need to meet this deadline in 9 months? Or should I be micromanaging, you know, with tasks and stuff on a sprint level? There should be a mid-level play field. I found this lacking in many organizations. Or some tried to do some really bureaucratic stuff around this. So I want to suggest something simpler. How about a board where teams, not project managers, not team leaders, definitely not scrum masters, where teams get together, maybe monthly, to reason about what are the most important things we need to focus on, the most important features, prep stories that we need to focus on, and they resolve all dependencies by deciding how they should work together. And this, incidentally, when I was taught user stories back 10 years ago by Mike Kuhn, he referred to this as shaping, you know, the backlog as an iceberg. And this is what we do. We have some more level of detail close up. Upcoming sprints, we have just a few sticky notes indicating the overall focus that we need to spend. So the tactical level, teams will illustrate how they will spend their focus and capacity. This means that it becomes a communication board to the rest of the organization. Hey, they're working really focused on my stuff now. Maybe I shouldn't bug them. It allows for them to talk about dependencies and resolve them by changing the way they work together. And when you become really advanced, you can start visualizing your critical paths or critical chains around this. And it's transparent, it's agnostic to method, because you can run projects, you can run release trains, you can do value flow, value chains, whatever in this way. And it also promotes different teams to work in different ways. It provides an easy integration level for them. And this is usually how it looks. So this is from a current work I'm doing. And this is interesting because I immediately get questions from management. They say it looks ugly. They say it looks uncoordinated. And they ask me, is this the way it's going to look later? Do we need a tool for this? I say, I don't know. The only thing I know is that if it looks like this in 5 years, you're doing things wrong. Because this is the starting point. Maybe in 5 years, your teams are discussing with each other and doing this maybe virtually. They may not even need the board, but it's to reinforce and suggest new behaviors. This is another example. This is from an organization. They used coloring. Yellow are new products, new projects. They were doing big installations. Blue is old stuff that we thought we had finished, but we have to go back and fix. Sometimes this meant traveling to Dubai from Sweden with 1 day's notice to fix things on site. And they mapped all of their work out in this way, and they looked at it and they said, it's like a giant blue flood wave of old legacy, drowning all of our new ventures. And they immediately started thinking, how can we change this? And that's what I'm after. I don't care about the boards. So if you want to put some kind of structure around this, perhaps to introduce this to management, this is the way I usually picture it. There are 3 levels. Don't let likeness to safe scare you. It really doesn't have anything to do with that. There's always a strategic level where roadmaps are set up. And there's always today an operational level where we fight the fires and we do the weekly planning or sprint planning or Kanban schemes or whatever. And I suggest a tactical level where you show the rest of the organization, again, how you spend your focus and efforts, and also the tricky decisions that need to be made to support you in doing this. Now, some people confuse this with hierarchy. It is a hierarchy, but it's not tied to person. It's tied to time span. So on a strategic level, you try to make decisions that go maybe on a yearly, half year, 2 year, 3 years time span. Operational level, it's day to day, week to week, sprint to sprint. Tactical level, I found over time that usually you can start by a quarter, 3 months, and then you can adapt this. This is the look ahead that is relevant to you and your teams. So by summarizing this, when we look at the behaviors we're looking for here, it creates a constant pull from the roadmap owners and stakeholders to invite teams to process the backlogs and the roadmaps to a format where it can actually be pulled into a tactical plan. This rewards continuous work, not, preparing your release train planning 2 days before the quarterly planning, which is usually an effect I see in many organizations. It also becomes, again, the play field where we can communicate in a very straightforward and understandable way. This is what we can achieve. These are the bottlenecks and limitations we have. Can you please give us some decisions on changing scope, changing priorities, changing milestones to be able to deal with this? And of course, you get a consequence chart, meaning that if I add something new, it's immediately visible what consequences it will have. I may not even have to bother the teams with this. It also provides a dashboard of just-in-time decisions that management need to make. Again, all the leaders and stakeholders to support you. And some of you will be working on all levels because you can provide input and it's relevant. Some of you will work on a couple of levels, providing support, and you will see which decisions you will need to make together with your peers to support the overall work. I'm always looking for a number of expected improvements when I do this, and I think the most important aspect of this is actually getting everyone in the organization to start facing the tricky questions. Okay, it's not about how much it costs. It's about we have these people. They come here every day because they want to do good work. How can we support them in that notion, give them a framework of limitations? This is what types of products we build. These are the people we build them for, if you're a product company. And how can we be there to help remove obstacles on a tactical level? Thank you for listening in.
Okay, thank you very much.